Hi, good evening, everybody. In our series of interviews with people from different walks of life, today, being a Sunday, I have a very interesting person. I thought let's not keep it, heavy on jargon, and let's take you to the realm of poetry. And I have a leading academic and poet of Hyderabad, Jhilam Chattaraj, who is very popular, and I have read her poetry a lot. In fact, her book, "When Lovers Leave and Poetry Stays," this is by my bedside most of the times. So, welcome, Chalam, to our chat today, and thank you for taking out time because I know you are a multifaceted personality. Let me tell you that Jhilam is a PhD. She is a professor in a college. She teaches English literature to students, and she's very multifaceted. She's written academic books too, and she's a scholar. So, despite all these roles, she is giving us time. First of all, Jhilam, tell us, how have you been? It's been a long time since we met.
Thank you, Shivani, for that lovely welcome and introduction. And good to see you after such a long time.
Yeah.
Wonderful to be in conversation with a multifaceted person like you as well. So, you have many talents, so I'm privileged to share my time with you. And well, I have been busy, good, sometimes not so good. And the pandemic has ushered a very new kind of emotions and experiences. But professionally, it was not very different because the moment the lockdown happened, within certain span of time, we started our online work, and that was very rigorous. All the trainings, and we had to learn a lot of things about how to teach online and prepare content online creatively. When the lockdown started, I thought like, oh, this is a good time. Now I can get a lot of time to write poetry. I'm sure I'll finish off like 100 poems for sure. Okay. That did not happen
So how
because,
you managed so far?
yes,
How many have you managed to write?
I have managed quite a few and have published also, but how I thought it would be, it didn't happen
Hmm.
because I understood that this sort of a pause that has happened in our life, it is not natural. And we human beings, we are meant to move, we are mobile creatures. So, even though initially I was enjoying the pause because generally I'm a kind of solitary kind of a person, if I don't have much of a social life, so I just go out for work and just cultural gatherings. So initially I thought it's going to be a blessing in disguise and I'm going to be very happy throughout. But after a month or two or three later, this sort of a stagnation sort of, kept creeping in, and I could realize that some of the days, some of the weeks I was just not fine. I wanted a normal life back. But I mean, maybe being aware of the situation helped me so I could just come back and do my creative work in whatever way possible and whichever way it could be done.
Great. So I think all of us have been through these phases, where we have told ourselves that, oh, let's be positive, and then some morning you just wake up with a doomsday kind of a feeling that whether your life will ever come back to normal or not. So
Exactly.
in times like this, I feel people do come back to the arts, the literature, and poetry is also a way of de-stressing and trying to understand what is happening around us and how to relate to it better. So I'm sure our talk will be therapeutic and cathartic for many people today. Um, do you think
Right.
poets, get affected a little more by such occurrences, and that is why they get into poetry?
Well, it depends on the poet actually,
Okay.
because before being a poet, he or she is a person. And it is also true that it is not necessarily that a poet or a writer will respond to what is immediately happening to them. That is not the purpose of poetry. Ki, okay, I write poetry. So pandemic is around me. Let me start writing about pandemic. I mean, at least to me, it doesn't happen like that. Or many poets that I know, it is if only when it starts really affecting you inside, it seeps into your bones, then you start thinking like, yeah, I should write. Otherwise, it is, if you see, okay, there was, the CAA protest was going on before that, and there are so many things that happened. I do not think it is necessary for poets to really respond immediately, because not everyone is in a position to respond.
True.
We're in a confused state. We don't know. And moreover, we have to remember at the end of the day, we are responsible for creating good art, not the message.
True.
So art cannot be compromised for an agenda or a message. We have to blend that two together, and only when a poet is ready to do that and present it as something that will suit the other, or something that will create some kind of a contribution in the field of art and craft, then it emerges as a poem or a really poet's contribution poetry. Otherwise, I would say it is a response. It is a reaction. It doesn't really kind of materialize into an object of art.
So, Jhilam, let's go back. Tell us, when did you start writing poetry, and what was the first thing that stirred something inside you, and one fine day you started writing more eloquently than normal people?
Yeah. Well, nothing tragic or something like that happened in my life. I really don't have an interesting story, but I was writing since I was in class 4. I mean, my mom is also a teacher, and she used to encourage us. She taught us in the school that I used to study. So she encouraged us to keep a book, and asked us that you write in Bengali. So I started writing.
Right?
No, actually, there's a place called Durgapur. It is near Kolkata town, as a city kind of a town, as you can see, somewhere in between. So my mom said that, "Hey, whatever you want, you write it down, and you can rhyme it, and you can use." So she showed me some, methods by which I could express. So that notebook, I remember, was filled of poems, but those were all in Bengali. I still didn't start writing in English. I had no concept of English that much. Then as I grew, I would write in school, but then there was a problem. I was very shy, and I was not confident at all. Okay, that share my works. I would write and hide it, and I would appreciate my friends who would write. I would read there, someone has written something. But although I was writing, I never ever had the confidence to like show it to someone or present it or read it out. That breaking the confidence took a long time, I should say, unless, I mean, till I almost like finished my PhD, and even then I was writing, reading poems, and but I didn't have the confidence. And it is only when I started writing the first book, I thought that it's high time, and I should just let them go. I mean, just let it go. There is no way I can hold on to these poems anymore. So just editing them, re-editing them, and that is how the book happened.
Okay.
So
And
that's kind of.
were you more like inclined to other forms of literature also? Because your PhD is in fiction, and
Yeah.
probably went parallel to your academic work. Is that how it was?
Well, no, if you say what I really enjoyed, that was poetry. PhD, PhD does very contradictory things to you. I mean, so I entered the PhD because I needed that degree, because I was looking for a job in the academia. And I was enjoying, it makes your brain think in different ways. That is what it lends your perception. Otherwise, it can really dumb you down to a greater extent. So, because it's a process of isolation, you're alone with your own work. So, at that point of time, I did my PhD in fiction, so I was reading fiction. I enjoyed that process. But if you see creatively, if I was investing my time, then I would read poetry. And I must say, there were times when I would feel very, oppressed, because I didn't have a means of truly expressing myself. Although I was in literature, but literature did not yet I was not in a space where I could use it to express myself. It was more of a kind of a regimented study, a scholarly study, for which I'm of course thankful to the university and my mentors, because that's what they have given me, the perspective to see things that I wouldn't have seen if they were not there.
Great. So, what are the things that inspire you to write poetry? I mean, does something trigger it, or you set out a time every day that this is the time I'm going to think and write something? How does it work?
Yeah, there is a process to this, or as there's a very cliched saying, is there method to the madness.
Yes.
But actually, I am inspired by very small things, details in life. Okay, small, could be some very small emotion. It could be a toothbrush. It could be an ant. Okay, it could be a broken piece of a biscuit, and from there starts the whole thing. It could be a place that I visit, and I'm not inspired by personal events much. It's not like I could say, oh, someone broke my heart and then I started writing poetry. That has never happened. Okay. So, but what happens? Something I see, something I hear, something I smell. That is the trigger point, and then the emotions are kind of inserted into that. And of course, I try practicing poetry. Maybe every day I am not able to write because your mind cannot really produce. Maybe I edit a little bit, or I read poems by other poets, or maybe theories on poetry, or some kind of essays on poetry. But this is something that I've learned over the years, that if you have to be consistent, you have to invest in that particular work, at least for each day of your time. You have to kind of space it out so that you can give it to what you really love doing.
So, which are the poets that have inspired you a lot?
Oh, there are many actually. So, I mean, primarily the poets who really triggered my imagination would be the modern poets, the American and the British poets. That means those who started writing just after the First World War and till almost the Cold War went on. That whole period of 1914 to 1960 and 70, when T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath. Then, if you come down to the UK poets, Philip Larkin. So these, because otherwise, of course, I was familiar with the Wordsworth and Coleridge. I mean, those were there, but they were making me happy, but they didn't make me uncomfortable. And I like poetry that makes me uncomfortable. That sort of, kind of grabs my the collar and shakes me up, like, hey, what are you writing? What are you doing? Look what I have done. So I found these works are fascinating, and I'm quite inspired by them.
Great. That's nice to know. Now, is there a particular mood also that you are in when you write poetry? Because we our image of poets is very moody people, and they introverts and all that. I mean, are you like that? And is there any mood that is required for writing good poetry? Because people rhyme things, but the deep poetry with some meaning, and as you said, poetry that makes you uncomfortable. Uh,
Um, well, I can't say if I'm an introvert. I mean, that others can say how I am as a person. But if you say a mood, no, not really. I need the mood for editing a poem, but not for writing the poem. So there are many poems that I have. It was like, what happens. It germinates in my mind. Okay, lines. Okay, the first line, the second line, the third line, and once I have in my mind like 3 to 4 lines ready, then it just comes one day and I start writing. And I have actually, I mean, I hope I don't lose my job. But while teaching also in classroom, there are quite a few poems where I've given work to students, like, you all do this work, and in the meantime, that time I have used up, because I'm always, running out of time. Time is very precious for me. That time I have used to write the poem. So I didn't need a mood at that time. My only pressure was to just jot it down and write it down.
you
But
don't
now
want
when I need,
to forget the idea.
sorry?
If some idea
Yeah, so
strikes, you don't.
yeah, it's like delivering the idea, so that I don't forget it, or I don't want. I mean, I can just have a visual look at it. Once that is done, that the river is there. I mean, the page is flooded. then I do need some quiet time when I have to edit it, and that is a process of torture, because a poet is never sure when the poem is finished. It's like keep editing, and there are for months you keep editing that. So that space, I need a bit of isolation, because I have to be very careful. Still, I make mistakes. Of course, there are errors that happen, and then I rectify it after a week or so. So that's the process for me, I would say.
Okay. So, do you think anyone can write poetry, or it's an inborn talent? It's something that you are born with. And can you teach poet? You can teach poetry as literature, but can you teach somebody to write poetry? What do you think?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. That's a very pertinent question that you have asked me, and there are a lot of controversies around it because people have different opinions. However, I feel it's a bit of both. I mean, it can't be just yeah, it can't be. I wouldn't say talent, because what it requires is sensitivity. And yes, I think anyone can, yeah, to at a certain level, when the person desires or wants to be sensitive to a language. And it is not, poetry is not about completely expressing yourself, that okay, I feel like this and I've expressed myself in like lines that I have cut short, I have written it in a structure and I've rhymed that, and this is my poetry. It is not as easy as that. So if but you have to be sensitive to the language. Once you're into that space, a person, they can be taught, and that is why we have MFA courses, creative writing courses, where it is taught. But just because it is taught, it doesn't mean the person can be an excellent poet now. The person has to have the perseverance, because I mean, poetry is so time consuming, and you don't know what you're going to get out of it, whether it will be published or not, whether someone will read or not. You have no future with that. You don't know where it will lead you. But still, are you willing to like just do nothing else and sit with that poem for 4 to 5 hours? If you are you willing to wake up till 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock at night, and your entire body is paining, but still sit with some lines and edit it? If that is there, then definitely one can be taught and one can learn, and it is a skill. It's a skill. Like you have cooking skills, so writing skills, I would say that.
Do you think it's a dying art, a dying skill? I mean, I don't see that many people reading poetry, or as they should, or we have different forms, like songs are a way of poetry. When you look at lyrics of popular songs, I'm somebody to whom the words always appeal more in a song than the tune, and it makes sense to me if the words are beautiful. So, I mean, do you think about the future of poetry at times?
That is again a very wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked it. Um, First of all, is it a dying form? Not at all. Secondly, does it have a future? Of course, poetry is the future. And thirdly, so where is the problem? Why do we think it is dying? The problem lies in the way poetry is published, distributed, and circulated. That is where the problem lies.
Okay.
See, when we start in schools, if you see, okay, what is the first thing that a child learns? Nursery rhymes, right? That is a form of poetry. But as you grow up, what I feel in that schools and curriculum, there's a lot of pressure to, you're forced to understand a poem. And I feel a poem can just be. We shouldn't put students or a reader in a space where the reader if the reader has not understood the poem, then the reader is a failure. That sort of an attachment should not be there. So to me, I don't see poetry to be a subject where we can really, I hate doing this, but I do this. I mean, I teach poetry and I mark people. But I say, see, when you marks is only for the syllabus, but for your true understanding, you make your own interpretation. And I am giving you that as correct interpretation. So the problem comes presenting poetry as a burden, as something that is difficult. Okay. And most of the poems that are taught and that were taught to us, or even now, those are all written in UK, poets from England and poets from America. Now, remember, we are a culturally different country. So when, let's say, in a village or somewhere in a town like where I grew up, when the words was daffodils is what I heard and I read, I was like, okay, what are daffodils? Like, how do they look? So I couldn't really relate to his happiness, and I had to substitute daffodils for some Indian kind of a flower. And like, okay, this guy saw this and he was happy. I enjoyed the poem, but that's what it is. We have to present it as a, something that is enjoyable rather than force a meaning out of it. And that is why people are a little afraid of poetry, or poetry gets the least space in, kind of poetry festivals also, and fiction is sold in the market more. Any publisher, international publishers, those who are here in India, unless you're someone really a big shot, or you have been writing for say 30 years, 40 years, and you have international recognition, then it is very difficult to publish. You have to go to independent publication house. That is where, but there is more experimentation. There are more people writing poetry. I mean, people are more brave in poetry rather than in, fiction and all of that. I feel so. So yeah, poetry is here to stay.
So that reminds me of your beautiful poem, Banaras, talking about Indian
Yeah.
imagery. I mean, it just, though personally, being an Indian, I haven't been to Banaras, but this paints such a beautiful picture. Uh, would you like to
Thank you.
part of it to us?
Okay, sure. Actually, Banaras, there's a, if you see, I'll first read, then I'll just tell you something. Banaras, an empire of histories by the sinking Ganga. Banaras unpass all that we know. Tawny ghats flash the teeth of civilization, and bull-trafficked alleys pickle its matchless charm. This is how travelers write. I remember Benares differently. Cold classrooms, breezy canteen air, vendors selling gourds on streets, rickshaw rides under a canopy of gul mohar. I'll just skip a little thing. No, I'll read this. Canopy of gul mohar. A lover's innocence, a stranger's lust, palm chewing men slicing my body with stares, brisk evenings and curfewed nights. Unfinished bodies arrived Benares to melt into the infinite. I, on the other, was desperate to blend into everything beyond.
Wow. I mean, there is a story behind it. Somehow I feel this poem contains a movie, a 3-hour movie in it. Tell me, correct me.
No, but Benares is beautiful. It is, all the cultural heritage, the ghats. I mean, they're just splendid. But also, for women, I mean, so when I was there, so or when I visited Benares, there is also this constant risk, you know. I never felt free.
Hmm.
I would always feel this threat kind of a thing that, which I've mentioned. And by the end of my visit, I was actually desperate to leave. And I mean, because I knew that it is not giving me freedom.
Many smaller
So
towns in India were not really very welcoming to women on the streets. I feel I could relate to it as teenagers. We have been through situations that chewing men, chewing men, staring.
yes,
Sometimes I
yes,
tell my daughter that you're lucky. These things don't happen nowadays, or probably we live in gated communities. We don't come to know. But for
right.
getting to our school or college used to be like an ordeal.
Right.
With so many.
See, you can get it. I mean, and you can't do something at that point. See, we were not like in a position ki, we will sap them, or we will,
We
we
were
were, I was so scared I could never look eye to eye also. Okay, with this man. So,
So I love that. In fact, I read these poems quite frequently. Another thing I've noticed, Jhilam, is that poetry is very sensual. I must compliment you. That you strike a perfect balance, although it is sensual, but it is never over the top. And I think that there's a very thin line poet has to draw, especially. I don't know whether it's categorized you as a woman poet, but you are a poet at the end of the day.
yeah.
But I feel women get it better, the sensuality part. Even the movies which are made by women, I feel they balance it better because they don't see it through that gaze of men. But at the same time, women are also feeling and loving creatures. They go through all the
Yes.
emotions and urges and whatever desires. And how do you balance this in your poetry?
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that I am not trying to be directly, like, physical, like it is not in your face kind of a thing, but there is a very kind of a, soft kind of an approach towards that. Well, that is how I see a man woman chemistry as, I mean, I just love that very subtle interaction between a man and a woman. And when I'm writing, I try to be very conscious of that fact that I hope I am not in your face, like, certain the use of words, I have to be very careful with the use of words that I just to describe a woman's body or how a woman is going to invite a man. And when I was in college, then I read several poems by these romantic poets like, Byron and Coleridge, and quite a few others were there. So where they and these metaphysical poets like I think what was his name, Andrew Marvell, and I was fascinated by the way these men were constantly inviting these women in their lives. Okay, and comparatively, there were very few, or there are very few women poets who are inviting the men. Okay, vice versa. There's always a man who is running after the woman, okay, and appreciating her physical body and her whatever it is. So I wanted to kind of, take a hint from that. I wanted to be the woman who invites a man, okay, and this invitation, yeah, this invitation. Of course, there are poets who Kamala Das is there. I mean, there are many poets, Indian poets also, who have done it very beautifully, very sensuous poems they write. So that is where to keep it sensuous and not sexual, you know, and to keep the tension alive. There has to be a constant tension. It is not that the man can come and get the woman immediately. There is a play, there is a, kind of a trick, and he has to solve that trick, that puzzle, and then only he can reach his destination. So it's like a video game, if you say it very crudely.
In centuries.
Yes.
So,
So that is,
like to
yeah.
any of those kind of poems. I love Parched,
Okay.
frankly.
Yeah. Past is a very interesting poem, and it is inspired by very, actually, I used to go to Calcutta with my father to appear for these entrance examinations because Durgapur is a small place. Usually, universities would not have centers. So I had to travel to Calcutta. So with my father, I used to stay there at a company guest house, and it is just in the middle of the city in like Calcutta, and there, I mean, all I could see when I would get on the terrace are buildings and buildings. So I had no work to do apart from studying and preparing for the exam. So I had like 2 days or something. So I would study, and then there were these families that I used to observe, okay, quietly. They couldn't see me, but I could see them. So, and I could see this very mechanical routine. Morning the woman would go get up, the kitchen light would be on, she cooks, and then the whole day the house is silent. In evening again, she comes back, she's again in the kitchen. The man is lighting a cigarette or with a glass. So this dynamics like fascinates. Huh? Sorry.
Reading the newspaper.
Yeah, reading the newspaper, and this dynamic. So this poem happened way back actually, and I was thinking like, so what kind of? I mean, how do they show love to each other, right? How do they express that? So based on that, I mean, I kind of worked on the poem and then put it in a modern, technological context, and then how technology is kind of ruining our bedroom relationships. Taking that also as a cue, I sort of wrote this poem. If you want me to read it fast, I'll just read. It is at 39. Yes. Okay. It's a long poem. How much time do we have?
I lost track of it, but can continue. Maybe another 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Past. It usually happens on the hottest of nights when the air simply snacks on our skin. Body on body, sweat and sweat, arms or aches. A pain from the past, a bulge from the daily bumpy bus ride. Our teeth collide and lips become tired of rubbing over the same lips again. Still, I try and light up my imagination. Breasts swell, nipples bloom, but he does not cherish the sweetness. Like a banker's finger, it's a quick work done by lustless tongue, married to a routine. Firmness is lost to fuzzy arguments, to unpaid bills, unhappy gods, and a noisy belly. Bodies withdraw, return to their respective phones. Fingers don't fondle, they type away furiously. Only beeps break the silence.
Wow. I think it's so true for today when all of us are into our phones more than anything.
Right,
We are a family of three, and all three of us are accusing each other. You are more on the phone, and you are more, including my daughter. I mean, she'll say, "Mama, you're on the phone," and I'll tell her, "No, you are on the phone." So you end up not talking. Because in the pandemic, phone has been a big relief. Also, I
Yeah,
feel
I mean, we wouldn't have survived.
if social media and internet was not there, we would have gone mad. Sitting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, art has helped man survive the pandemic. Unfortunately, art has been, categorized under non-essential, products, arts and artists. But I mean, imagine if there was no internet. I mean, we would have, I think, killed some people. Some murders would have happened by now.
I'm reminded of the session we had at a restaurant, and that was a very unusual session where we had done a lot of poetry with food, associated with food. And
Right.
surprisingly, you came up with quite a huge repertoire of poetry on food. I never knew poetry could be written about food. You know, I love food, but poetry on food and the way you express it, again, would you like to tell us how that process happens, and if you could read one of those?
Yeah. Food is actually means
Being a
I've been wanting to,
Bengali,
sorry.
I'm sure
Yeah.
treat your food is like worship.
Yeah, we do. I mean, Bengalis love to eat, and so do I. But of course, I have a very different sort of eat. I like to experiment a lot. I mean, I like to eat different things as well. So I think at your session, I read the poem Alu Posto, and then I've written a poem on puchka, but it's very long and it's still work in progress. So I won't read, but I will read
Wait
one
for your next.
small one small poem about food as something that heals us, and it has been published during the pandemic in a book called Hibiscus. This is an anthology that is, I think, the first and poetry anthology from India, and it focuses on poems on healing, empowerment, and focused on the pandemic. So here I wrote something very small. These are called as it's a form like haiku and all of that. This is an American form called Sinkin, which is written in 5 lines only. So here it goes. It is called soothed, bones fixed to a weary bus ride, gravel shaken belly, its wait for mother and warm rice. Are you getting a lot of traffic sound? Is it there?
What just now? Otherwise, not before.
Okay. So that's one, and there are quite a few, but I don't have them right now. Yeah, there's one on water. I've written two actually. On how there's one poem on a headache actually, and how headaches can be cured through water instead of medicine. That is there in another anthology. I'll just read this short one on water. It's called Hydrate.
The Alu Posto one also.
Yeah, but actually I don't have it with me, the
Okay, well,
printout or something.
and convenient, which is
So yeah, this one is water hydrated. It goes like this: water, rippling salt for bone dry aches. Before the sky falls on the heat of spent vows, drink it.
beautiful. Excellent.
Thank you.
It's been such a delight listening to you, and I'm sure it'll be so calming for everybody who attends or listens to our session. Tell us, what else can we look forward to? Are there any books in the offing, and what are you
Yes,
planning on next?
I am working on a second poetry book as well. But there's a lot of other assignments that I'm doing on poetry, and like today itself, a few of my poems, five of my poems, have been published by a US based journal. So it's on poems that are written on plants. So I have on poems on flowers, on basil leaves. So I will put it up on Instagram. That's coming up, and that has happened today. So yeah, hopefully a book in 2021 if all goes well.
Excellent.
And
Look forward
but
to.
don't want to pressurize myself. Let me. Poetry takes a lot of time, so I want to give it that time and bring it out. I don't want to be like, okay, like I have 20 books or something. Maybe I'll produce few, but do the best I can.
Okay. So thank you so much. Once again, I would like to
Thank you.
show you this beautiful cover. I mean, I just love the cover of this book. And
Yes,
the title is When Lovers Leave and Poetry Stays. You can connect with Jhilam on social media. On Instagram, she's known as the Poetry Chef. And
yes.
otherwise, she has her website also, I'm sure. And I mean, I would
It's available on Amazon, so even someone can order it through Amazon. Now it's available.
so anybody who loves poetry, and what I find about lovely about your poetry is that it's not heavy. It's so light, and it's just a moment. It describes a moment, and then it'll fill you with so many memories and beautiful evocative imagery that'll transport you in time, and that is what I love about your poetry.
Thank you so much. I mean, these words mean a lot to me, and this is my reward. All those nights that I wake up and write. So this is the reward that we have. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
A brilliant job, and thank you for giving us your time and doing this chat with us.
Sure, my pleasure. Sure.
Bye bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye. Bye.